Good afternoon. On behalf of Paraclete Press, welcome to this webinar with Gernot Candolini and Jennifer Brandon on Places of Light, the gift of cathedrals to the world. My name is Rachel McKendry and I'm the publicist here at Paraclete. Thank you so much for joining us. A recording of today's presentation will be available for 2 weeks to share with anyone who couldn't make it, and we'll also let you know how to get a copy of Places of Light. Please take a moment to find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and feel free to submit any questions you may have for Gernot and Jennifer throughout the webinar. We'll hope to get to everyone at the end of the talk. Hosting our webinar today is Robert Edmondson. Robert is an editor and one of the directors here at Paraclete, and he'll be guiding our discussion. Thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you, Rachel. It's my pleasure to be here with Gernot and Jennifer and with all of you who are joining us today. I'd like to start by talking about the Mount Tabor book series because Places of Light is one of our 7 Mount Tabor books. I'd like to show you the book and show you the Mount Tabor logo. The Mount Tabor logo comes from the Mount Tabor Center in Mount Tabor Center of Art and Spirituality based in Bardo, Italy. This is an international organization facilitating ecumenical dialogue through educational symposia, visual and performing arts, spiritual retreats, and exhibitions of contemporary sacred art. The Mount Tabor Center bridges cultural, ecclesial, and national boundaries and provides opportunities for reflection and discussion about faith and creativity, contemplation and communion, liturgy and beauty. Paraclete has been inspired by this vision, and in partnership with the Mount Tabor Center, we've established the Mount Tabor series of books, exploring the intersection of art and spirituality and the power of beauty to reveal the divine. Now I'd like to introduce to you our 2 authors, co-authors of this book. They are Gernot Candolini and Jennifer Brandon. I'll tell you about Gernot first. Gernot is from Innsbruck, Austria. He's a designer and builder of labyrinths and a retreat leader. Through seminars and books, he has helped bring the symbol of the labyrinth to a new renaissance. His retreats focus on cathedrals and labyrinths, and he often gives seminars at Chartres Cathedral in France. Jennifer Brandon delights in sharing the unique overlap of faith and music with others on the Pilgrim Road in Europe, the Holy Land, and in her own neighborhood in Indianapolis. She holds a Master of Arts in Church Music from Christian Theological Seminary. So without any further ado, I'd like to ask Gernot, how did this book come into being?
Well, hello from my side, from the other side of the ocean today. Well, it all started with my interest in labyrinths, and that's how I got to the Cathedral of Chartres, a very special place. And when I was there, it was like I would have been hooked. I came back over and over many times, and I invited other people to come with me. Also walking from Paris to Chartres on the old Pilgrims Road, which is a fascinating way to walk towards the cathedral, and then stay a couple of days there and enjoy the place and see the cathedral from many sides. I invited my old friend Paula D'Arcy once. I met her on a retreat about male and female journey, and we did many weeks together, walking from Paris to Chartres or at Chartres. Well, Jennifer, you were one of the participants of one of these trips.
Yes, my very first time to be in Chartres was in 2015. I had heard Paula speak earlier that year, and she had referenced quite often her inspiration and stories that she had learned from on the Pilgrim Road to Chartres. And I knew when I was hearing her speak that I had to go. I had to go. And within a few months, I was on that trip, walking those fields and forests of France between Paris and Chartres for the first time. And it was a galvanizing moment for me in my life, just helping me to grow as a person and also to help me find my voice. And as a musician, I helped contribute to the pilgrimage that week, just at the invitation of Gernot and Paula. And you know, from that point on, I guess the rest is history. We decided to collaborate further from then. And, you know, as Gernot is saying, you know, Chartres has a very special place in my heart. But during that time that I was, that first trip to Chartres, I was already planning a year-long travel sabbatical with my family. We planned to be out of the United States for 11 months. And we then did that in the 2016-2017 school year. And, you know, listening to the stories that Gernot and Paula brought forward, it just, you know, he spoke of that hook, and I was definitely hooked from that point. So during our year of travel then, you know, that hook and that pull to see many of these glorious cathedrals, not just Chartres, but, you know, all over Europe and the Holy Land, that helped kind of guide our travels during that travel year. And yeah, it's just become a really special place and special way to travel.
Well, thank you. Well, and then if you start to take your time when you're at a cathedral, if you look long enough, not just passing through, a universe of stories, histories, and spirituality begins to unfold. For me as a Christian, these stories and images, the beauty of a place like Chartres, it starts to nourish the soul in a so far unknown way. It becomes a source of strength and joy and also faith. At one point, I also asked myself if other places might be as interesting. And so I visited other cathedrals. And I must say that Chartres always has been my favorite. But there were also so many other examples where you see things that you don't realize when you just walk by, but they start to touch you, and then it makes something inside your soul. And then I had this idea to write a book about it, and I was trying not to collect only the history or the facts or the numbers, but talk more about what it does, what I see to me, what it does to me, strengthening my hope, and also to understand what the cathedral means for the people who are there or get in contact with those places. And so I would like to read some lines from the chapter of rose windows, because those rose windows, they are so gorgeous, and it's worth to stand and look at them until the imprint of the picture gets into your eyes. And so when you close your eyes, you still see it. Rose windows are often the masterpiece of glasswork in a cathedral. Each one has its own pattern and colors. They are reminders of the circle of life, of the beginning and end of history. Like a great mandala, they symbolize the beauty of God coming to earth and leading humankind to paradise. Representing the rhythm of breath flowing in and out, the main colors are often blue and red. They weave through these spectacular images, bringing them to life and inspiring thoughts of the ever-present give and take, moving through one's life. When shadows fall on the windows, they become noticeably bluer. And when the sun streams in, they become deeper with red. The light makes them seem alive, according to the coming and going of the sun. Rose windows are like letters from paradise. They always shine. Sometimes they are quiet and mysterious, sometimes glittering and shiny, sometimes calm and still, sometimes bright and festive, sometimes night blue or daytime red, but always clear and beautiful. Well, then came a day when I met Jill Joffrin at her book presentation about Mary in the Cathedral of Chartres, which was published also at Mount Tabor. And I talked to her and talked also to Mark Burrows from Paraclete Press about the possibility to translate this book about the cathedrals into English. And he said, wow, this is a beautiful book. We'd love to do it. But you have to add some of the American cathedrals. And that was an exciting idea. And that's also where Jennifer comes in again, because my English is good for basic conversation and a little bit of sharing, but not to write a book. So I needed some help with English and also with the context and with the style. And since Jennifer had a blog that had a similar language than my language, I asked her if she wants to join and help me and be a co-author. And that's how we started to work together on the English version of this book.
That's great. Good to hear the background and to know that a publisher picked this up. The publisher, German publisher, picked it up. But then now the two of you needed to work together. So how did you work together? Jennifer, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. You know, because we had worked together already several times leading pilgrim groups over the last few years and had shared a lot during that time, we had, as Gernot said, we had a similar language and kind of knew each other's styles of just working together and had a good understanding of how we wanted to approach the stories, the heart stories of these magnificent places. And so it was actually a fairly easy transition to then take what we were doing in person with groups and turn it into writing. So we did do some travel together in the North America to do some research and photograph many of the places that are highlighted in our book that are from the North American continent. And we, you know, this was really a project where we were really in it together. I would write and he would, you know, add his thoughts and revise what I had written, and I would do the same with his. You know, he would send me what his thoughts were and I would revise or add my thoughts. And so it really became, we kind of fell into a rhythm, if you will, of just going back and forth until, you know, each chapter, each story sort of found its voice and its way forward. So that's kind of the how it came to be. And then, of course, just gathering all of the images. You know, we each have thousands of images of these places, and to try and select which ones was fun and interesting, but it was a really great process of working through, you know, which little pieces were going to find its way forward. Yeah.
Great. You know, many of us have seen pictures of these places, but we may not have known the stories behind them. So tell us, why is it important to know the stories behind these cathedrals?
Yeah, it's like if you just are even in the presence of these places for just even a few seconds, anywhere your eye falls, you can clearly see that these places are trying to tell a story, right? And what's so awe-inspiring about them is that, first of all, they've been standing there, many of them for centuries, 8 centuries or more. And they're not just stones and glass that are frozen in time. These places have been breathing the history in and around, with the people that live in and around them for all of this time. So many liturgies and special events happen within them, but they've also stood alongside all kinds of events in history. And I think what is maybe one of the most amazing things is that these incredible, magnificent places that were built so long ago still speak to us today. They still resonate with us, and they, it goes right up, that history I was speaking of, it goes right up to the moment that you and I enter into them. We become part of it and become part of their stories. And there's so much still that we can learn from really taking a look and asking good questions about what's going on in each place. Gernot, did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
And also when you look closer, you see how much art is there, how long they took to unfold something. If you look, for example, into the face of the angel of Reims that you can see in this picture, if you look at him for a while, then you start to ask the question, what did this stone mention know about God, about humanity, about us, that he made such a face that looks at us and smiles, and we feel that there's more than a stone, there is a message. And if this message reaches us, then we are inspired, we get happy, we need to smile back, we need to know, or we start to know how God might see us. So I sometimes tend to say, if this is true, that this is the look of God's angels, then a lot of things are okay where I am not sure if they are.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to think about, all of the different statues and stones that are often on the outside of the building, but sometimes on the inside. That craftsman, that stonemason, that artist had to take a whole life and condense it into one image that they were going to capture in that stone. The picture that you're looking at here is of a saint, a young girl who is local to Chartres. Her name is Modeste, and she was an early convert to Christianity, and ultimately was martyred. The story goes at the hand of her father. Her father was an influential person in the city and had a lot to do with her ultimate demise. But you look at this image of her, and she has this very striking gesture. And I learned that this means I accept. And once you start to see that that's what that means, there's actually other images in the Chartres Cathedral, and then there's other images that I've noticed in other cathedrals and other places that also have this same gesture. And it's interesting to then think about, why did they choose this in order to represent her life and the look that she has on her face? She is calm and strong and resolute, and she is accepting who she is and what she has come to believe, come what may. And that's just one example of the hundreds, thousands even, that are available throughout the stone figures that are on all these various cathedrals.
That's great. Good to know these stories. Gernot, did you?
Yeah.
If you read this little chapter about
Yeah.
this thing.
Yes. So what I'm about to read comes to us from chapter 19 of our book, and it says, it's called Incline the Ear of Your Heart. And it says, the rule of Saint Benedict, the basic rule of many great monastic orders, begins with the words, incline the ear of your heart. Not only do we possess external ears, but we obviously have a finely tuned internal way to perceive things that are not spoken or seen. Inclining the ear of our heart is the invitation to hear the voice of God, to internalize the angel's oft repeated message to be not afraid, to lean toward each other and hear what goes beyond words. Inclining the ear of our heart is the invitation to respond to what we hear and anticipate. And that's what we're invited to do when we are standing in the presence of all of these incredible artists and what they have left for us to listen with the ear of our hearts.
That is why the next picture is one of my absolute favorites, and I insisted that it must be in the book. It's from the Portico Gloria in Santiago de Compostela in Spain. And again, you see these two musicians that listen to something or hear something without needing their eyes. They are just, and if music and being open to listen comes together, sometimes these wonderful moments arise where we feel that something flows into our heart, which is very strong and powerful and encouraging. And the only thing that we know for sure about heaven is that there will be music. And it's part of heaven on earth sometimes if we make music or listen to music. And if we would be able to do it like that, to be so open from inside that we can hear something which goes way beyond our senses, then something very special happens. What I think is interesting is also that the cathedral goes to the very highest emotions and very highest moments of beauty. It goes very high up, but it also goes very deep down into our deepest needs, in our deepest sorrows, in our deepest longings, and all of that is what is dark and what we cannot accept sometimes. And again, down there in the crypts, we find sometimes very, very special places. And here you see an image of the crypt in Chartres again, where the Madonna also have the closed eyes, probably of other reasons.
Yeah. I'm going to read just a little bit from the book that talks about the chapter that talks about the crypt called The Way Down. Most cathedrals have a crypt or a subspace that leads visitors into the depths. These lower churches are much darker, sometimes cavernous spaces where the hustle and bustle of daily life quickly falls away. They are an underworld that holds open sacred space for contemplation. Sometimes silence settles in upon the visitor like a damp, heavy blanket, offering an invitation to slow down and encounter the darker and deeper sides of life. Life happens both in the light and in the dark. The word crypt means hidden, and many lower churches offer a safe place for dealing with those things in life that require only the faintest of light. Sometimes dark, deep quiet is just the environment needed to see clearly. And what you're looking at there in the crypt of Chartres is even older than the church that stands above it, because it survived a fire that precipitated the church that is standing above it that we see today. But this is a very special place because this is where pilgrims for so many hundreds of years would enter. There's a special entrance outside of the church that goes directly into the crypt, and the pilgrims would come down into this darker space and would often stay there for a novena, which is a period of 9 days for prayer. There's a deep well that even predates Christianity that is actually in the crypt, just behind where the Black Madonna is sitting. And sometimes, you know, they knew of this well, would want to seek the healing waters of this, but also to be in the presence of this Black Madonna, to be in this space that just holds you like a womb. And then there was a space after this period of prayer and silence and reflection. Then the pilgrims were led up a set of stairs into the light of the nave, and were able to then come into the brilliance of the beautiful windows and everything that's above it. And I think that, you know, that's reflective of many crypts all over the place. You know, it's just this place to come in and be with whatever you need to be with within yourself. And it's a safe place. And the Black Madonna, I think, you know, her eyes are closed, but she's not asleep. Think of it more as, you know, if you tell a good friend or your mom or, you know, somebody that you trust something that is deeply pressing on you, and that person receives it with their eyes closed, you know, and that is the spirit, I think, in which, you know, just as they're taking it in, they want to feel it all on the inside. And that is the spirit of the space and of her presence there, and is often the case in many crypts, you know, across Europe and even in the United States.
Thank you. Well, if you look into history, there also are some very interesting marks where the cathedral plays an important point. This is an image that has deeply impressed the German people after the Second World War. It is the lonely tower in Cologne Cathedral in the middle of a desert of rubble and ashes. We cannot imagine how disastrous the catastrophe was. And this cathedral would have survived, but in 1940, a German air raid destroyed the Cathedral of Coventry. Next. And only one single back wall survived time. And in the Christmas sermon of the same year, the pastor of the church said, "When all this is over, we must reach out to our enemies and build a more friendly world with them in the spirit of Christ the child." And from Coventry, they started a reconciliation program. He said, the provost of the cathedral said, "You must write 'Father, forgive' into these back walls." And then they started a reconciliation program after the war right away. And a lot of churches gathered in prayers for peace and reconciliation. There's also one famous event when the Chancellor of Germany, Adenauer, and the Chancellor of France, Charles de Gaulle, met in the Cathedral of Reims to seal the reconciliation between France and Germany in 1962. And this was the start of the relationship between France and Germany that led to the European Union. And this reconciliation was also built on a very strong negotiations, a lot of good contracts. And yeah, you can take the next picture. And they invited, in France, they invited German artists to rebuild the broken glasses. And the German invited French artists to build the broken glasses in Germany. And so it was an exchange of art and also a mark stone of friendship and a new way of reconnecting. So these are the windows in the Cathedral of Reims made by Imi Knöbel from Germany. And the next image is a famous blue glass wall made by the French artist Gabriel Loire in the Wilhelm Gedächtniskirche in Berlin, in Germany. And so the cathedrals have become mark stones of reconciliation and peace. And from these places, a new understanding of that we all are one people and belong together started to come into existence.
Yeah.
There's one more chapter, which I think is interesting, because you can ask the question, is there a cathedral being built right now? Yes, there is one. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona in Spain. It's the biggest construction place of a cathedral in the world. And they are building a new cathedral and they want to be finished in 2024. Jennifer, you've been there.
I have been there. I think it's 2026 because 26 is the 100th anniversary of Antonio Gaudi's death. And so they are pushing to get all of these 18 spires and all of these facades and things that were his grand vision to be done in time for that celebration. Although I read today, they have been really stalled by the COVID-19 pandemic. So hopefully they will be able to stay on track with that. But there were really two driving sources of inspiration for Gaudi, who was the main architect for many years, the beginning of the construction of Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and that was nature. And of course, the Christian faith. And he really looked at nature for ways that it supports us and surrounds us, and wanted to incorporate that within. And so what you're looking at there is actually the ceiling, and the columns within the church are made to be like tree trunks. And then the ceiling is this glorious tree canopy. And, you know, you'll see sort of to the center and to the right a little bit of this image there's four pillars that are slightly a different color, and there's these little sort of oval images that represent the four gospel writers, and that surrounds the altar area and where the altar table is, those four pillars. It's so tall. If you see on the right-hand side of this image, there's like a clear space, and it's almost like fuzzy in a way. It's such a vast cavernous space that it sort of creates its own microclimate, if you will, and all of the light pouring in. And you know, one of the pieces of nature that Gaudi brought into this space in a way that is so different from the Gothic cathedrals, but is so powerful, just as powerful, and that is through the stained glass windows that flank either side of the nave. On one side is more of the warm colors, which is what you're looking at there. It starts green and it kind of has this orange, yellow, red, and eventually it moves towards the back of the church and the images are all red. And then on the other side, it has the cooler sides. But these windows, unlike Chartres, they don't tell the Bible stories. You know, the windows in Chartres or a lot of the Gothic cathedrals were meant to tell the biblical stories to people who were largely illiterate at that time, and to bring those stories forward. Here, what we have is a tremendously amazing use of color that creates an experience of light like no other. So they're on the windows, if you look closely as you're standing there, you'll see words that are printed on the window panes themselves that represent places that are significant to saints that are special to the people of Barcelona and within the Christian faith, and also pilgrim sites. Chartres is one of them that's on the windows. But overall, it's really this sense of this light pouring in that just permeates the space. And it's like a baptism in some way. You're standing there and there's all of these people standing in the nave just in awe, and they're wearing the colors of these windows because the light is so dense in this space. And, you know, it's just a great representation of how, you know, in our Christian faith, we often refer to light to represent God. And there are so many ways that cathedrals do that. And so Sagrada Familia, in addition to, you know, being this new build, new construction, they've really, the architects and Gaudi's vision really take light into a different space than its predecessors, to create that really unique experience of being just washed in this light of God streaming through the windows. And the next slide that is showing the Washington National Cathedral, you know, this is a very special place that sort of melds together both of those styles of window, where you have the wash of color and you also have the windows telling the stories.
Well, you're right that Washington and Barcelona, they have something in common, and it's the way they deal with the light. And if we look into the Cathedral of Washington, we also see this great concept of the colors and the light coming into the church. It's a difference between Chartres and Washington. In Chartres, the colors stay in the window and they become colorful carpets, but the light that goes beyond is then, in Chartres, it's again white, it's monochromic. You don't have colorful shadows on the walls, but it's completely different concept in Washington. For example, if you show the next slide, we see that the color that goes through the window, it creates throughout the day, changing images throughout the seasons, throughout the weather. So every day you have another church from the light concept. And then we had this idea at the end to call the book Places of Light, because the light is so important and it makes such a difference to other places that we go to. And I think that God he created light in the very beginning because he's so close to that. We don't know what light is really, but it nourishes us. We need it. Everything needs it. So it's the start of everything. So the light inside a church like Washington Cathedral or other places is one thing that is very, very important and exciting. Well then, we decided beside Grace Cathedral and St. John or St. Patrick's and Washington to also give a glimpse into the concept of also a new built church. And we took the one of Cape Cod, where this organization, this publisher lives. It has its capital. And again, we see this very intensive dealing with art. how can we do a beautiful mosaic? How can we do a meaningful painting? How can we do a room concept that enlightens people, that inspires people? How can we create something with a never-ending story, walking through over and over, coming back over and over, discovering something new, make something new, and make a place where we can have our festivities and have a home for our spirituality, and have a place where we can meet and be inspired. And so again, when this morning light comes, or the evening light comes through this light bulb, it's like the fire, the blood, the spirit. It's all in one. What we never can really grasp what it really is, but we can get close to it if we look at it, if we get in contact with it, if we sit there for a while and just look at it, or see what it makes with us when we are in a place like that. And so many places do the same thing, like St. Peter in Rome, where also the window, the stained glass window at the very end of the church is so important. Because with all this history of St. Peter, all the history of the church, which is very complicated, the light is the center. And hopefully the Holy Spirit touches us through it. And that's why they placed this image there. And that's why Michelangelo built this beautiful bowl up there, also to play with the light, not only to make a grander architectural element, but also to let the light play with it, or come in and show what it is. So the next. So we also did a little bit about St. Peter in the book, because it is a central place for Christianity, and it is so big. And yeah, the next. Well, if you remember the image that we showed about the war, the cathedral, the Dome of Cologne, is now finished. It's all restored. Well, it's a never-ending story to build a cathedral. And it is now a bridge. It is a bridge to the people, and a bridge to those who search for peace and faith, and their what lifts us up and what connects us with heaven. And I sometimes think that a cathedral can be like a coat that we can put around our soul. And it is something that connects us with something bigger, and it has a message. And the message is that we have a home. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful, Gernot and Jennifer. Thank you so much. Rachel, we must have some questions.
We do. We have so many wonderful questions coming in. Thank you so much, Gernot and Jennifer. I'll start here with a question from Jeff Williams. Jeff says, you mentioned several times about how cathedrals were so much a part of history and the daily activities that were going on in the world around them. They were a place for deep worship and drawing closer to God. Do you see that as a part of our spiritual development that has been lost today?
I would not say, well, when you look into history, you see times where the church had a very hard time. For example, the Cathedral of Chartres, for a couple of years, it was not allowed to have service there. It was a temple of the understanding, and all the churches were closed in France in the 18th century, the end of the 18th century. For years, they were all closed down. And I see when you go to these places, you see what actually happens. If you go to St. John in New York, it has been there was a great fire, and they don't have the money to restore it. It's a black hole in the middle. Well, maybe that's an image for our time now. So there's something still to be restored. If you go to Mexico City, you see there are 40 masses a day in the cathedral there. Well, it's not dead, it's alive. And if you go to Chartres, you see that she is now renovated completely. She prepares herself for the years to come. So there is something ahead. And I think the churches, the buildings always symbolize what's going on right now. They are close to the people, and well.
Yeah, I think that's, I think the day that we turned in the manuscript for this book was the day a year ago that the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris caught on fire. And there was such a tremendous outpouring from across the world, people that had been there. These places are more than just places. They represent so much about our faith, but also just about the community in which they live and breathe and dwell and are present to the people passing by them of all faiths and of all walks of life. As Gernot said, they really are living, breathing structures and places, and they continue to be. So it just continues to, as he said, like reflect back where we are, but also gives us hope, because there have been some truly terrible times, and yet they still stand,
So true. Thank you so much. Here's a question from Beth Stantz. Beth says, did the architects of the cathedrals also specify the specific sculptures and their placement, as well as what each window would look like? Or was there an artistic team that coordinated the overall architecture with the art from floor to ceiling, inside and out?
Well, that's a difficult question because we don't know exactly. They, especially in the Gothic times or in that times, they didn't write down exactly what their plans are. They made plans. There was some freedom for every artist to do as he wanted to, because you see so many differences. You can see, well, this is another artist in this one. It's a completely other image. So nobody came there and say, well, you have to do it all the same. There was a lot of individuality, but the master stonemason was the master architect. And so it's always a big concept, and always a lot of people have to work together. And probably Robert knows how it works together when you build a church like yours.
Yes, yes, indeed. It took a team. There were architects, but there were also acoustical consultants. There was an organ builder. Many people came together, not to mention, of course, the artists who designed the art and then executed it. So it takes quite a team to produce a cathedral.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Here's a question from David Arcus. This is referring to the light through the windows, those beautiful colors. Do you suppose that the splash of color from the windows at Washington National Cathedral attempts to replicate the theory that the interior walls of cathedrals were more polychrome than their present day conditions now convey?
Yeah. Again, an interesting question, because there were a lot of places where they used color, but it seems to be not to be very bright in many places. So it was removed through the centuries and was not painted over and over. There are other places, like, for example, La Chapelle in Paris, or the cathedral in Basilica Notre Dame Montreux, where the colors always are part of the interior. And so it's always, it has been different kind of concepts. So sometimes let's use a little bit of color, but not too much. And if it fades, don't worry. And sometimes it was, no, we want to have color inside, and so let's use color inside.
Thank you. Jessica Brown says, hello from Ireland. I give tours at our cathedral here. The cathedral was from 1150 in Killaloe in County Clare. And one of my favorite features to point out is how the credence niche, a niche in the east stone wall, is bent to represent the bent head of Christ on the cross. Is this a common feature in other cathedrals in Europe?
I don't know.
Yeah, I have not. I think what is so part of the inspiration is that each cathedral has these little details. Each parish, each parish church has these little details that were important to the community who built them, and that that's what makes us go to all of the different ones, because they all, in a way, tell a collective story with each of these individual pieces that are interesting and highlight a certain piece, a certain portion of the faith or the story of Christ, or the saints that are important to that particular region. So I haven't seen that particular thing in other places, but there are countless stories of examples of similar peculiarities about those kinds of places that make them interesting and make them theirs, right? It's their story to tell.
Absolutely.
I love to hear that, though. It's a great piece.
She says, thank you. It's interesting that you mentioned about the manuscript being submitted on the day that Notre Dame was burning. A couple people are asking, do you have any thoughts to share on the Cathedral of Notre Dame? What are your thoughts about the future of that place?
Well, I think it will be renovated, and it will take its time. So right now they are still working on the security issues, and they are starting it's not started yet to rebuild anything. Well, there are some nice modern ideas, at least for the spire that broke together, to make a modern one. That would be nice. But right now it's a great tension between people who want to do something new and others who want to beware the old. There are strong forces that say, let's build it exactly as it was. And others say, well, let's make something for the 21st century. And I am curious. I don't know. I hope that they make an interesting new spire.
Yeah, this is just part of that. It's just one more example of how, this place is living the history with the community around it. So as Gernot said, now this current community, 800 years after it went up, right now has decisions to make about how it goes forward. And this is what we've seen. This is what you see when you look at just a cursory look back at history and of these places. There are all of these different stories of a collapse here, like in the case of the Cathedral of Ely in England, where they had a collapse and then they built this fabulous octagon structure above their choir space, nave space, as a result. And that was that community at that time, their contribution forward. So the people of Paris, and I think Paris is such a worldly city, right? There's voices from all over that, are going to put their input in and move it forward. And it's exciting. It is exciting to see how that place will continue to live and breathe and reflect the community around it.
Yeah. Something we can all look forward to seeing.
Yeah.
Here's our final wonderful question from Julie Dorsey. She says, I cannot wait to see this book. Thank you for this glimpse. I love the stories. How did the experience of birthing this book change each of you, and what has stayed with you?
I have been very moved by the stories, just what I was just talking about, the stories of how things were, how these places have fallen down in ways or have been bombed, and then how they've been rebuilt. I am incredibly touched by the symbiotic relationship between France and Germany and their artists after World War II. And, the Cathedral of Rheims, which was actually damaged in World War I. I mean, when I was reading that and seeing the pictures, I cried. When I imagined the actual just heart-stopping moment of the community standing there watching their beloved cathedral burn, it was just such a heartbreak. But then, I have to go there. Last summer I went to see the glorious new, windows that Amy Knoebel and Marc Chagall have created in that space alongside, the old ones. It's so hopeful. It's so hopeful, that there is a German artist and a Jewish artist in a French cathedral, the French cathedral that represents, where all the kings were coronated and all of those things. It's so hopeful. And especially in this time that we live in America, right? We can take some cues from this. It's how these are living and breathing. We can, I think we have a lot to learn from that example that was set for us. And I would love to be able to take that forward into our lives here and now in this particular moment that is so difficult in which we are inhabiting.
Well, I would say, well, there are so many of those beautiful places out there. Just go there. I've been there. I have been inspired. Go there. Take on the coat that they offer, the shelter, the joy, the inspiration. And if you need some schub, to push you there, go and get the book, read it, and see them.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Gernot and Jennifer. Thank you, Robert. Thank you to all of you who joined us. It was so wonderful. We've joined together from many continents and many time zones to come together to talk about this beautiful book in all these places today. So really, thank you so much to all of you. The event will be available on YouTube later on today, and then for 2 weeks after that. So please tell your friends, tell the people who were unable to attend that they can see it there. And Places of Light, which we've all been holding up because it's such a beautiful book, and all of the Mount Tabor books are available from your local booksellers and from paracletepress.com. If you order any of these books from our website right now, they're all so lovely. They're 20% off. They make such beautiful gifts. They're inspiring to look at for yourself. So I just really encourage you to go to our website, take a look, browse through them. And this is a wonderful opportunity to add them to your library or gift them to anyone who loves art, who loves these sacred spaces. It's just a beautiful, beautiful collection. I also wanted to take a moment to let everyone know that on August 7th, Monsignor Timothy Verdon will be leading an online retreat, Reflections on the Art of Prayer. Much Christian art describes prayer, from the churches, large and small, called houses of prayer, which we've just been looking at, to mosaics, statues, and paintings showing holy women and men in the act of prayer. Art, in fact, has been a school of prayer, and this retreat will reflect on the ways in which artists supported this essential function of Christian life for communities and individuals. Leading the reflection and opening it to prayerful meditation is Monsignor Timothy Verdon, a Roman Catholic priest and art historian based in Florence, Italy, who will project images of the works discussed. So surely anyone who has enjoyed this book and this conversation today will want to take a look at that retreat and consider signing up. We hope you do. I'm just quickly looking to our Q&A here. Many thank yous to Gernot and Jennifer and Robert. Awe-inspiring, truly beautiful, wonderful presentation reminding us of the wonder of observation. So again, thank you so much to all of you. Thank you for your beautiful work in this book. Thanks to all of you who joined us. We hope you enjoyed this time together as much as we did. And our prayers are with all of you around the world for health and safety. We hope you'll join us for more of these times together with our authors. Our calendar of Zoom events and our online retreats is available on our website, paracletepress.com. So thank you again. God bless you all. Hope to get together again sometime.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you
Take care.
so much. Bye-bye.